This is the NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation interest group meeting. We have a lot of regular folks on the call today and some newcomers as well. The NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation project is a collaboration with USGS to help align state efforts and coordinate best practice sharing to really make sure that 3DEP collection, processing, and availability is the best that it can be across the nation. The interest group meetings, these are open meetings. We host them a few times a year, trying to provide interesting content out to the community around 3DEP and LiDAR acquisition efforts across the country. We're going to start out today's meeting with a little bit of our typical meeting format. We're going to give some updates as far as what's going on in the USGS side of things with 3DEP. I'll give some updates from the NSGIC point of view on what's going on and the projects that we're working on. And then we have a really exciting discussion lined up today with some industry experts and LiDAR acquisition partners about the future of LiDAR and where we're heading. So I'm just filling space here. Looks like Brian has joined. Awesome. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes to let folks come in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my deck just so that we can kind of get rolling here. All right. All right, can everyone see my presentation?
Nope.
No?
No, not yet, no.
Okay, let's see. All right, how about now?
Yes.
There we go, yep.
Great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Once again, for the folks who are just joining us, people are still streaming into the room, but we are in the NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation interest group meeting. I'm Jordan Regine. I'm the NSGIC 3DEP program manager. I help interface between USGS and state team members to ensure that we're aligning state efforts and providing as much support as we can to help states and local and business partners be as successful as possible in collecting and making available 3DEP data for folks just generally. Today we have a really exciting meeting lined up. We've got a welcome, so welcome everybody. We'll hear a USGS update, what's going on as far as 3DEP collection and plans for FY24. And then we have a really, I'm going to present on a couple of things that we're working on from NSGIC side of things. And then we have a really fun panel discussion lined up today with some industry experts and LiDAR acquisition specialists on the future of LiDAR acquisition. So I do know Brian, I saw that Brian is on the call. Brian, are you prepared and ready for a USGS update?
Yeah, Jordan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. I don't want to spend a lot of time today, take away from the panel discussion. And I'm fighting a cold and dealing with maybe some laryngitis. So if my voice cracks, please forgive me. DCA project acceptance statistics through really says June 24th, but through right now, we have received 17 DCA proposals for FY24. We've accepted 12 of those across 10 states. And things that are new on the map are cooperative financial assistance projects in Washington, state, thank you to Abby, and in Long Island, thank you to Jeff Langella. And then something new on the map is the cooperative agreement for Central Indiana, excuse me. And big thank you to Marianne Cardwell and her team there. Looking forward to all of those projects. We anticipate closing the FY24 DCA here in the next few weeks. I will still accept applications here for another couple of weeks, but I think probably June 1 it's going to close, and then we anticipate opening FY25 sometime around August. My project manager thinks second week of August is what the target is. So we'll be trying to get that out as quickly as possible. I would like to note that we still have plans for additional projects in FY24. We're really looking at these medium green colored areas that represent the contributed data sets on the map. Thank you, Jordan. Like to resolve some of those. In some cases where GPSC vendors were the original collectors of the data, we're looking at maybe having deliveries of those data sets come to USGS, meeting the base specification that was in effect at the time. We're also looking at some potential recollections of those projects as we continue to try to work our way towards having 100% of the baseline completed. And so that's sort of the acquisition status. Jordan noted in here, and I'd like to say this was a heavy lift. The National Tribal Notification Letter went out in early March, and the notification period for the tribes closed on May 1st. For all folks involved in 3DEP, this is a good development. It means that we're going to be able to do acquisition before we actually do any additional notification with the tribes. What we will do is tribes that responded to the notification that ask for restrictions of data, we will restrict that data according to their requests, and we will be providing tribes with notification about a project being published before it goes out on the national map or other resources for the USGS. So they still will be given an opportunity to respond, but we don't need to give notification prior to acquisition. And that should help us speed up the acquisition process. And I think the vendors will be appreciative of that as well. Last thing I'll say, and then turn it back over to Jordan. The 3DEP working group is starting to get agency priorities for FY25. These priorities are very important with respect to how we go about making determinations about data collaboration announcement, DCA projects. We expect to have those priorities turned in within about the next 5 to 6 weeks. The priorities will be posted on the CSketch app. So we thank NOAA for keeping that application up and running. It's a good resource for folks to go and see where federal agencies have priorities for LiDAR acquisition. And Jordan, I'll end there. Take any questions if folks have them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Does anyone have any questions for Brian? I'll monitor the chat as well if anyone wants to drop anything in there. All right, great. Thank you very much, Brian. Always appreciated. Great to hear from USGS and what's going on. Pretty exciting to see this map continue to fill out.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
On the NSGIC side of things, top of mind for states this year, as always, we're keeping the planning guide as a living document, help folks organize their teams and ensure that they have a great resource for approaching and completing their 3DEP projects within their states. Top of mind this year, as states' original baseline data is starting to age, we're starting to look forward to next-gen 3DEP coverage. And how can we build support for sustainable funding to support those collection efforts? So we've developed a one-pager to really kind of highlight and get folks excited about 3DEP, given an understanding to stakeholders, whether they're in private industry, Congress or legislatures around what 3DEP is and why more collection and on a regular collection on a regular basis is important and compounds the value of that data. So we've been working on this over the last couple of months. Just incorporated some feedback from the last state team meeting that we had last week. I'm going to go ahead and after this, I'll drop a link in the chat for anyone who wants to take a look at that. I welcome any feedback. I think we're getting pretty close to publishing this out, but this is still a draft. So if anyone has any feedback on how we can improve this, I am all ears. We're also we're in the beginning stages of building upon the 3D Nation benefit and requirements study that was put out by Dewberry, NOAA, and USGS a couple of years ago. They did a great job of setting, of giving us an idea of the value and benefits of 3DEP data. But for those who have really dug into that study, a lot of the responses are best guesses and estimates of what kind of value the data is experiencing within states. We really like to try to develop a methodology to bring that into a more of a quantitative and less of a qualitative nature. So, that way we can really help sell that the value of 3DEP data to stakeholders and folks who control the purse strings. And then also on our radar is gaining clarity around nearshore and inland bathymetry. A lot of states are starting projects. I know Washington State has projects lined up among others. So really looking forward to diving into that. That's what we're working on is on the NSGIC 3DEP for the nation side of things. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear them. Let's see, we've got a few folks in the chat. Some questions for Brian. I don't know, Brian, if you want to answer that question in the chat from Jennifer out of Minnesota. We can go ahead and hop back. She's asking about FY24. When would these collections take place? And this, I think I might be able to take a stab at this, Brian. Which is why. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
No. I'm just reading it. Let's see. First off, hi Jennifer. How are you? Let's see. When would these collections take
Thanks
place?
for asking, Brian. Doing well. Just out of curiosity about those the applications you're still accepting for FY24. I was just surprised by that. But really, I guess my main actual question was about C-Sketch and FY25 preparing for that.
Well, this is always the C-Sketch. So let me knock them out here really quick. So yes, the FY24 stuff, for folks that are on this call that are aware, those that aren't aware, we've been struggling to get final budget numbers for the Department of Interior, USGS, all the way down to my program, and it's just this week that we're finally starting to see some numbers. And so it is well into May, and that's part of the reason why there's funds left, is we haven't known how much we were going to have, and so I've been very conservative about my approach. The spring acquisitions are underway for some of the FY24 projects. In fact, quite a few of the FY24 projects already had the acquisition complete. But if someone was to submit a DCA proposal right now, I think probably the best that we could look for is the leaf off period coming up of late fall 24, winter 25. Our contracting folks are, to say that their red line probably doesn't do it justice. Because of the budget timing this year, they're going to have a lot of task orders to put through the system, and so they're very late where they are. So I don't know that we would be able to get anything out earlier. The next one, this is one that has been kind of on my radar screen for a while now. As I understand, C-Sketch used to allow for the inclusion of non-federal priorities. I don't know the history of why that changed, if there was some sort of an issue there, or they just decided to do away with it. But right now, C-Sketch does not have the ability to have a non-federal priorities layer. I've had a couple conversations about that. We haven't really done anything to move the needle on that. We can kind of reinvestigate that. I think there are folks that would be interested in that. The questions are who would maintain it and those kinds of things. But I know that there's interest there, and at the moment, that's just not something that's part of the capabilities of that particular application. Jen, does that help?
Yes, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Jen, for your question. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to this one pager in the chat. If anyone wants to take a look at that and send on feedback, I'd love to hear it. Last up in our regular meeting format, just gonna have a few reminders of what's coming up next. For folks on the state team who are with us, just want to send out a reminder that the June 5th state team meeting is canceled. There's no way for me to cancel on your calendar if you registered through our registration form. So just remember to take that off on your end. I'll also send a reminder before that meeting, just so that you're not caught by surprise sitting on a chat or a meeting room. We do have a July 3rd meeting lined up, as well as August 4th. Got a fun presentation for August 4th around bathymetry that I'm excited for. And then August, we'll also have another interest group meeting. The timing and date on that is to be determined, but keep an eye out on the My NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation interest group community for updates there. I'll be sending those out as soon as I have them. All right. So now we get into the meat of today's interest group meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight our speakers and give you an introduction to them. Let's see, how can I find these participants here? Sorry, one sec. All right, and then we also have John. Make it easy. All the J's, they're all right next to each other, which is great. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have an exciting panel lined up around the future of LiDAR. With us from Woolpert is Jeff Lovin. He's a Senior Vice President of Government Solutions. Woolpert is a USGS GPSC contractor. Jeff has previously served as the president of American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, as well as the president of MAPS and as a member of the National Geospatial Advisory Committee. Also joining us is Josh Novak. Josh is the associate vice president and senior geospatial technology manager at Dewberry, which is also a USGS GPSC contractor. Josh has been instrumental to successful LiDAR acquisition projects across the country, including a host of 3DEP collections throughout his 16-year career with Dewberry. John Neufeld is joining us out of Canada. He's the president of IO Aerospace, a high-altitude remote sensing startup. He's an entrepreneur with nearly 20 years of geospatial experience and the founder and co-host of North 51, which I know a lot of you just attended, a gathering and conference embodying the spirit of modernization. So I'm really excited to have him talk about where he sees the future of LiDAR going. And then last but certainly not least, we have Jacob Thiel joining us. He's an account executive in the spatial intelligence group with NewView, a satellite-based LiDAR acquisition startup. Jacob has a wealth of technical experience analyzing and processing aerial LiDAR from his work with Dewberry and Michael Baker International, where he worked before joining NewView. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. So to give everyone an idea of how we're going to do this, I'd love for each of you to give a brief introduction around, what you guys are doing, what you're excited about into the future. Let's keep it brief, and I'd love to get into a little bit of a guided discussion to see how the advances in LiDAR technology are really going to impact states and the 3DEP program specifically. And then we'll round out with some Q&A for folks who are still on the call. So just we'll go in the order that I did intros. I don't want to play any favorites. So Jeff, if you want to give a brief introduction and let folks know about what you're excited about in the future of LiDAR.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So, Woolpert has been building customized sensors for specific solutions for over 15 years now. Previously, all of those have been done for federal clients. for specific programs within the federal government. But I'm very excited. This is one of the first times we're talking about it broadly. We are building with our own money internally, financing, and building our own new topo LiDAR sensors. The first one is being developed now, should be deployed here midsummer. But these are cutting edge sensors that basically are game changers, basically about 4 times as efficient as anything that we currently operate commercially. So super excited about that. We've been talking to USGS since nearly the beginning. They get to visit our sensor lab in Mississippi when all the parts were still laid out before even assembly started. So staying in contact with them, really wanted obviously to get their blessing and approval of the data once we have this thing airborne and flying. So that's what's exciting and happening with us.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And Josh, you want to talk about what you're excited about over there with Dewberry?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having us here to talk about this. At Dewberry, we don't build our own sensors. So one, I'm excited to leverage some of these new technologies that the other folks on here do build. For one, we tend to get to use a lot of the different sensors that are out there and leverage them for their pros and cons and really work on the data that it is. But I'm really excited to talk a lot about the processing side. It's something we do a lot of and are really passionate about, and talk about the automation, talk about the deep learning and machine learning models that the whole industry is moving towards. But really the key is to get better data, more accurate data, better classified data or more classifications into the hand of the end users, as part of this group in the States, where we have more information and more intelligence out of these LiDAR collects, right? It's not just a point cloud. It is a meaningful and usable product that everybody can use. So that's what we're really excited about in the future here.
Awesome, Josh. I love it. Yeah, people often forget it. It starts with the point cloud. It's what comes next where you really start to gain the value. Great, thank you. And John, I'd love to hear what you guys are working on in IO Aerospace and what you're excited about in the future of LiDAR.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. So as Jordan mentioned, I'm the president of IO Aerospace. We're a fairly new company. I live up here in Canada, but the company is technically headquartered down in Colorado in the USA. We do things a little bit different. So we operate a high altitude, specially modified Learjet 35. It's got dual payload bays, and this lets us travel huge areas, cover wide areas, collect data with all kinds of sensors. We've done campaigns with, regular image optical sensors, methane detection, all kinds of things. And of course, we're looking at the future of LiDAR here as well, wondering, what can we do, up at 36,000 feet? And, with a bit of a nod to Jacob, if you guys can do it from space, then surely we can do it from 36,000 feet. So we're excited to explore that eventuality and what that looks like in terms of gaining efficiencies and covering massive areas and remote areas as well. So super excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thanks for joining us. Jacob, you guys are the new kids on the block for sure. Some exciting stuff, putting LiDAR into space. What are you guys excited about, Jacob?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Thanks, everybody. Really joined NewView, and we now are a small business to develop the first ever satellite-based LiDAR. We're really developing it and having a mission to have a constellation of 20 satellites in space to collect LiDAR at a global scale. And then also having the platform to have a cloud-native solution to effectively process it and distribute that amount of LiDAR data. Is definitely something we're actively building as well. So not only the engineering side of having a prototype to discuss that it actually is possible, and we are definitely confident in that, and actually having the platform as well to effectively work with that amount of LiDAR data. So definitely really, really exciting stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. All right, so I sent the panelists a list of topic areas, and I don't want to stray too far from them, but I am going to ask a question starting out that I received from a state team in Tennessee. I met with them had a great fortune of meeting with them in person last week in Nashville. And I was extremely surprised to hear that the cost of LiDAR acquisition on a per square mile basis has dramatically reduced over the last 5 to 10 years. And so a question for our GPSC contractors, and then first, I'm going to give you guys a chance to respond first, and then we'll go over to our startups. Is what do you think you can attribute the dramatic reduction in pricing, somewhere between 30 and 40% on a per square kilometer basis? What can we attribute that reduction in pricing to, and how are the advances that you guys are working on, whether it's on a sensor basis or a processing basis, going to contribute to that continued price efficiency for 3-depth data collection? And Jeff, since you started, we'll go ahead and give Josh the first crack at this one, and Jeff, you can follow up.
Oh, this is great, because I think Jeff was going to take all the things I probably was going to say anyway. So, I mean, it's twofold, right? It's an efficiency in the sensor platforms. They have gotten much more efficient. You can fly them faster, fly them higher, get that higher point density because the detectors are more sensitive, and you're getting more data more quickly. And that's one very major factor, right? So the cost of just that baseline acquisition of those products has gone down. And the second is the processing costs have gone down as well. One of that is hardware, good CPUs, good GPUs, good RAM. That's all gotten cheaper, right, over the last 10 years. And so the hardware we need to process those data sets has gotten much more cost effective to purchase and run. And then our automation, across the board in the industry, we have done a much better job now that we have higher point densities and better data right out the aircraft. We can process that much more efficiently. So I think in my mind, those are the two main contributors to those cost efficiencies that you guys have seen.
Great, thanks, Josh. Jeff, you want to add anything there?
Josh nailed it. Those are the two huge contributing factors. And thanks to the 3-depth program, having such a large program to feed the industry. And, not only did it obviously benefit our firms, but it pushed everything Josh just mentioned forward, right? It challenged the sensor manufacturers, right? I think we're on our at least second, maybe third generation of sensor on 3-depth, right? So as Josh said, flying higher, faster, wider swaths of data collection. And then thankfully, processing software, hardware have came along with that, right? So it's all efficiency, right? That we're able to collect more data more quickly and, process it more efficiently, right? And that's what drives the costs down, right? So I think that trend will continue as we looked at next gen 3-depth. Again, we've building our own custom workflow for the sensor I mentioned earlier. Again, hoping to show yet again higher densities. Again, either efficiencies at the same densities we're looking at, or potentially even higher densities for prices we're used to seeing for QL2 or others, right? So I think, that's not just us, the manufacturers, the industry will continue to push this forward, right? And then when we have other approaches coming in, like Jacob with New View and so forth, that just continues to drive the innovation and keep things moving forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff. And that's really where I'd like to lead into Jacob and John giving a swing at this. Is the geospatial industry, I think, is pretty well renowned for how collaborative and open and collegial it is. But innovation is founded on the back of competition, right? So I'd love to hear, Jacob and John, how you guys see your innovations in companies pushing the needle and adding some pressure to the traditional aerial collection to really drive efficiencies in the industry.
I'll jump on that. I think that's a really interesting question, Jordan, to bring in here, because I was going to agree with the other guys if you asked me the regular question. And then a panel where everyone agrees is never as much fun, right? So I think competition and startups and new entrants to the fields, definitely add a new point of view, a new way of looking at things. Certainly automation, sensor design, flying high and fast, that sort of stuff makes a huge difference. But when we can bring a different viewpoint and a different methodology in terms of how we go about this data acquisition and processing, I think that gives us a chance to change the game a little bit. So that's what I enjoy about being in a small startup company that's really taking off, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John. Jacob, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to come in here as a different perspective and just kind of say, you know, we don't really see ourselves as competitors, but also coming in to improve the baseline data for the United States. So NewView's coming in at a global scale, so we want to improve the baseline LiDAR data at a global scale, right? So we're going to come in and be able to achieve QL2, QL3 LiDAR data from space. And, you know, as we do that, we can do that on a more regular basis, improve the baseline data, narrow in the approach for our aerial providers and partners to go in and really target specific locations for higher accuracy data.
Great. I like that. Thank you, Jacob. All right, guys. Awesome. So I'd like to keep it rolling in this leapfrog fashion we have going on here. You all are all working on actively innovating in your space, whether it's on processing or altitude. You know, we want to create more accurate, more reliable point clouds that can be used for derivative products. But a lot of folks in this meeting, you know, we're here to discuss 3DEP and that reliable, high quality, certified data that comes out of USGS and is made publicly available. So a question I'd have for all of you, and we'll switch gears here, given the John and Jacob a crack at it first. When do we think that a lot of these things will hit the scene and be available? And potentially, is that the trajectory towards 3DEP compliance? How can we start to make that move? Like, when can folks expect your products to be incorporated into these national data sets?
I can jump in here. John, you took the first one, so I'll take a swing at it. So really, as of right now, our launch dates are to be determined based on a bunch of the engineering and design phases and testings. So based on that, you know, that's really to be determined. So until we're actually in space, collecting LiDAR data, providing proof of concept, and then, you know, providing the, you know, accuracy of the data meets the standard. You know, that's going to be an ongoing conversation that we're going to be having with USGS and our partners who are the 3DEP experts. So that's going to be an ongoing requirement for NewView.
Great. Thanks, Jacob.
Yep.
Yeah, from our perspective at IO Aerospace, you know, we're a small company. We have the Learjet, which gets us an incredible advantage in terms of speed and height. We're working right now with sensor developing partners, scientists, very smart technical people, and looking at what options we can do and build out to be able to collect LiDAR from a Learjet and be able to cover those massive areas at that same spec. So, you know, for us, we're looking at working with individual partners. We're looking with people who are interested in very specific types of data collection. I think it'll be some time until we're really ready and proven out for a 3DEP integration, but certainly that's something we have on the radar down the road.
Great. Thank you both. And then Jeff and Josh, I mean, Jeff, you just announced you have a sensor hitting the scene pretty soon here. And then Josh, you spoke to some advances in processing technology. When do you think those will be ready to start processing 3DEP data live?
So again, you know, we I think wisely let USGS know of our intent back in, gosh, November originally, and we've been giving them regular updates. So our plan is to have them presentable data for their scrutiny, evaluation, testing, approval here by midsummer for use on projects probably for the fall or for spring of 25.
Awesome.
And I think the only thing I would add to this is, well, on the sensor side, we have some historical information there too, right? I mean, we have single photon and Geiger mode sensors that came onto the scene, you know, 5-6 years ago. And we've seen how those have gotten integrated over time into sort of the baseline program, right? And it is a proof of concept. It is ensuring that not only do you meet the specification, of like 3DEP, but also the expectation of those end users. And there can be differences between those things, right? And so, as these new technologies sort of develop, it is not just do we meet baseline spec, but is it meeting that expectation? Are we getting to the ground? Are we getting data that is not only usable as a point cloud, but also for those back-end processes of vegetation and buildings and power lines and the things that people want to use the data for? And so on the processing side, I think everybody here can probably agree, you're seeing it now. I mean, these things are already being implemented into the 3DEP program, and it's just being done in a way that's probably careful and considered to say, hey, while we can help automation, there's still that manual process where we validate and check and recheck to make sure not only are we meeting the spec, but that expectation of the usability of the data when we automate it. So not over promising that, hey, all of a sudden we're going to start delivering every classification, every single point is going to be classified perfectly. Well, no, it's not, right? We're going to do it very slowly over time and really understand how those products get used.
Great point, Josh. Thank you all. And I think that was, Josh, that was a great segue into what I'd like to ask next is, and I'd like to get into a little bit of a discussion around costs and benefits, right? And I'd like to actually lead with costs out of that, because I think you highlighted a couple of things that a lot of folks are really top of mind, right? Because it's one thing to have high, accurate, unbelievable point cloud, and it's another to host that data, to process that data, and to make it available to folks, to building derivative products and actually putting it to work, right? So can you guys speak to some of the costs that will be associated with these advances in sensor processing and collection methodologies? And I guess let's break the order here, and I'll give Josh the first crack at this one, because I feel like he will do a snake action.
This is very much what I do every day, right? Is understand these things for Dewberry at least. And it is an interesting discussion, right? Because when we talk about automation, we talk about, especially AI, deep learning, machine learning, right? I think there's a lot of misconception that, hey, it is you push a button, you run a process, and it should be very, very cheap, and it should be very, very fast, and it should be very, very accurate. And you can't have all of those things, right? There is an upfront cost that we all have to bear in terms of getting those programs started. So it's not just oh, this model exists. We're developing and training models. So a big part of that cost comes on hardware, right? We need more advanced GPUs, and GPUs aren't cheap, right? So that graphics processing unit where we're using these cores to process and train a deep learning model or train an AI model takes time and takes cost. There's also that cost of getting data ready for training, right? So, we may train significant amounts of data through a process before we're even confident that the output will even come close to meeting what we typically do geometrically, right? Where we're looking at point comparisons. So there are those sort of hidden costs that I don't think are as visible or as maybe as easy to understand, that, oh, you have to do all of these steps to get something working. And, as just an example for the folks here, one of the things that we do on the deep learning side is we train models to identify hydrographic features just from LiDAR data, not using any imagery, not using anything else, right? And it's actually a pretty big challenge, because spectrally, our intensity looks different as you cross the water, if it's at the nadir or at an angle or where it actually falls within that point cloud. So you have to build models to model where the actual water is, and then you can train based on those. And so it's maybe not such a simple kind of process, and you have to kind of work through it. And what I can tell you is, we've been working on that for a year, right? And that's background. That's our cost that we're doing before we're even confident enough to get a product out there. However, when you mentioned, what are we seeing on 3DEP, we use that process on some of our 3DEP products, right? So in coastal Louisiana, in coastal areas where we have immense amounts of data that we have to pull, it's not efficient to do it manually. We can use those processes to augment that manual process right now before we can say, hey, it's a great output by itself. So there are those significant costs that I think all of us are bearing as industry that are kind of hidden before we can see that really substantial decrease in cost to produce some of these things.
Great, thank you, Josh. And I'm going to go ahead and hop over to John here, and then we'll go Jeff and Jacob.
Yeah, I think the question of cost is always an interesting one, right? So, people kind of generally expect the cost will come down over time. And I agree. CPU costs has come down, GPU costs has come down, storage has come down, and with the advent of cloud processing spinning up in a bigger way than ever before, you're able to kind of spin those up and down on demand and spread that out so that you can compress the timeline, right? I think another interesting, competing factor though is that people also expect data quality to go up over time. And I think we should look at the cost of and the value of the product that you're getting in the end, and recognizing that, of course, everyone wants costs to go down, but at some extent, if you're getting better data quality and a better product at the same price, then that's, just as good a value. And so I think we should pay attention to that. It's something we should all drive for, and we should all drive to serve our customers in the best possible way. But the notion that we can integrate deep learning models and rapid classification at no additional cost, perhaps is a bit of a misnomer. So I think it's worth looking out for what's the actual value you're getting out of this product, and does it meet the need that you're using it for, commercially, professionally, and so on.
Perfect. Excellent. And Sean Vaughn out of Minnesota posted in the chat along that exact same lines, giving some real world data around his experience there with regard to, quality increasing. So overall costs not necessarily going down, but you're getting of the value proposition is increasing. So great point, John. Jeff, you want to take a stab at costs and how your innovations we can think of it from a cost perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pile on with John a little bit that if you look per square mile price over the life of 3Dep, yes, LiDAR cost has come down. However, right, we're doing more and more QL1. We're doing more QL0, right? Clients are wanting higher and higher point densities, right? And more than ever, derivatives, right, that we're creating from the data. So while yes, there will be a gradual decrease, there are, as Josh said, the upfront, it takes a while, right? These huge investments, like all of these guys, we've made huge investments in AI. We're building, AI workflow right from the get-go with the new sensor, but we're putting it in, we still have a lot of commercial sensors, all of our processes trying to build efficiencies. Building those models costs a lot of money, but as Josh said, blew my mind the cost of the hardware to run those, right? I mean, it is extensive, right? To ramp up and have the horsepower to run these AI workflows and so forth. So all that cost is built in. Gradually, that will work itself out, and you will gradually start to see those increases. But I think the best way to word it, the way John did, is the value, right? Is that we are doing higher densities, higher quality data, more derivatives, and so forth. So it's hard to do this dollar for dollar comparison because, again, we're delivering a much more advanced product than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So it is that kind of graduated scale of things. And again, I think that'll continue, right? I mean, we're hoping when we look at how we're working this new sensor, it's like, well, we're going to deliver, be able to deliver QL1 or better for what we could do QL2 with sensor X, right? It's those kind of scales of things, right? So again, I think it is looking at the value proposition more than just the pure dollar for dollar trying to compare, because it is a different product today than what we were doing just 5 years ago.
Awesome. Great points, Jeff. Jacob.
Thanks. A lot of what you guys are talking about on the hardware and processing side of things are, very particular to meeting the, 3Dep standard, right? And that's a big factor for processing and meeting the accuracy and the data classification procedures. You're just running so much data through your hardware. NewView's kind of focusing differently on, really raising the level for the baseline data for QL2 and QL3. So, as we're focusing right now on engineering our satellites, we're also engineering the platform for kind of like hosting the cloud-based architecture data for initial processing and these types of things. And that's ultimately bringing some of the costs down on at least our side of things. But as it pertains to meeting the 3Dep standards, that's where I would look at the guys that are already doing it, Wolpert and Dewberry on the panel right now, that are, attesting to the data classification and accuracy. We're really focusing on the baseline data, getting it out there and meeting some use cases. And, as it particularly to satellite collection, it will cut down on QL2, QL3 data because we are not mobilizing aircrafts. So our satellites will be constantly roaming the Earth, our whole constellation. So we'll be able to collect LiDAR data, at a daily rate on specific areas and large scale as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. And it was great. Man, you guys are just killing the segues here. I love it. You mentioned use cases, Jacob, and I think a few of you mentioned this, and that's really what it's all about at the end of the day, right? It's not just generating the data, it's how can we actually put it to work. So my next question is, with the advances that you're seeing, what new use cases are being unlocked? How can folks use the data in new and interesting ways and really create real world value, whether it's generating revenue, protecting resources, or even saving lives? What are some use cases you guys are unlocking with the advances in your LiDAR acquisition and processing technology? Let's start. Let's give Jeff the first crack at this one. I'm trying to be fair. Hopefully, I'm not all over the place here.
There's a broad scope if you look at different client types, right? So I think someone mentioned earlier talking about the whole utility energy market, right? We're getting densities now that, years ago there was a lot of helicopter-based mapping for collect utility infrastructure and so forth. We're able to do that with, a higher flying fixed wing platform with LiDAR, right? And able to extract wires and all the critical infrastructure needed for utility inventory folks. The densities that we're doing, again, when you look at state and local government, I mean, all the stuff we're extracting from LiDAR, right? Whether it be, for ADA compliance type stuff with sidewalks and so forth, to impervious surfaces, the agricultural applications for land use and so forth. It's we started LiDAR in '99, and we were looking at a way to speed up traditional photogrammetry for topographic mapping, right? That was the focus. And I never thought back in '99, looking forward, that all of the different things we would be using LiDAR for, to just use aid with imagery or without, to do critical feature extraction work, whether for all different types of uses across several different markets. So it's been pretty amazing to see it evolve.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Let's hop over to Jacob, and then we'll go John and Josh. And Jacob, what kind of new use cases do you expect to unlock with your advances in LiDAR technology?
Yeah, so really, I believe it just opens the doors for accessibility, coverage, for various use cases, and just having the available up-to-date recency of the data is going to be really key. And as we have our platform right now, we have the availability to task satellites. So through our various partners, you can task satellites to capture the duration of an area over a given time. So whether, say every Thursday you want to monitor this coastal area for flooding throughout the month of, say July, you can actually, or you will be able to do that with our satellites when they're in constellation as well. So you can monitor not only imagery based, but also elevation for these given areas. And I really think that opens the doors for, various use cases for, emergency management, for FEMA flood modeling. It's going to be very interesting to hear all the use cases that can come from it.
Thank you, Jacob. And John, I'd love to hear how, I know your product isn't quite in a 3D compliance yet, same with NewView, but how does a wide area collection, if as technology improves and you are able to meet that base spec sometime in the future, how would having that wide area collection unlock new opportunities and use cases for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's big value in terms of that wide area collection, right? So it decreases the temporal difference between different flight lines and different portions of projects when you're able to collect big areas all in single flights or in a matter of days. And having that temporal difference minimized, means that what you're looking at is consistent across the whole area, also across a similar time period. A bit to Jacob's point, it also helps with recency, right? So you can go back and do a quick revisit fly the area again, get an update, see how things have changed, and make sure that you have the latest and most up-to-date information. I really also love the opportunity around feature extraction. I know that utilities are super hot right now in terms of LiDAR feature extraction, and there's a lot of AI related companies out there who are doing that kind of work. And then I wonder too, what can we do on a broader scale as we get data across wide areas with high revisit and good consistent temporal timelines across it all. What are we going to be able to extract from that wide area imagery, or sorry, wide area LiDAR, that we haven't been able to in the past? And so that's something I'm really looking forward to as well.
Great. Thank you, John. And again, a great segue, because I think Josh, I don't know if you don't need to be narrowly focused into processing and feature extraction, but I'd love to hear, how is technology, how do you see technology advancing and unlocking new use cases?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Jeff on this. Been doing this for a long time, right? And the advancements that we've already made, from 1 point every 2 or 3 meters to pretty much consistently 10 points per square meter or more, really has unlocked a lot of potential use for this data set, right? To what John said, it's that repeatability. So you can start to use LiDAR much more effectively for change detection. Whereas imagery, we were always very consistent. We understood the geometries of the imagery because of the AT and the way we process that. LiDAR is really catching up to that as well. And so with those higher point densities, before where you might have 1 point every meter, at 10 points per square meter now, you can see, you have more confidence, I should say, maybe not see, but more confidence in where the corner of a building is, where the edge of that feature is, how far the actual vegetation extends into your right of way, right? And be able to use that for better decision making. So as we get more and more point density, and as we get these advances in better coverage, more repeat coverage, more consistent coverage, that change detection, being able to leverage that data for using in ways that imagery had traditionally been used for impervious surfaces and things like that. I think you're going to continue to see that more and more in use, but also the accuracy of it will get better and better as these systems get more and more points on the ground, so that we can actually do better analytics with it than just extract a 3D building or extract here's the center point of my vegetation. I mean, that's another place where this has really advanced of, sensors used to kind of be at nadir, and you'd have, your side looks. A lot of sensors now have forward and reverse looking, models as well. So you're getting sides of buildings better. You're getting trunks of trees better. So when you do analytics for the tree, you're more confident where the center of that feature is, and can extract information about that tree. Now, the diameter at breast height, you can, there's a lot of things you can start to do as the accuracy and the density increase.
Awesome. Great. I love that. This is, I would like to bookend this use case and cost benefit with an additional conversation around costs. I think the original conversation, we talked a lot about the cost of developing the technology and the cost to companies who are advancing it. I'd love if you could each touch on the cost to the end user, right? Because higher density point clouds, more feature extraction, larger buy-ups, those derivative products. How do you see the advances that you're making impacting the cost to the end users of the data, whether it's in terms of processing or accessibility, shareability? And do you think that, yeah, will the use cases that are being unlocked provide that benefit weight to exceed the costs that they'll have to incur with the additional data processing, hosting, and the like? Hopefully that makes sense. Let's give Jacob the first crack at this one.
Yeah, I think I got your question here. So the overall acquisition will definitely come down for QL2 and QL3 when using our satellite-based LiDAR acquisition. Meeting the actual 3-depth standards for, actually paying to meet those standards is what, end users are doing. So that would retain to survey, the classification, accuracy within that specification. So there's there's a bunch of processing costs that go into that where, we would really lean on a lot of our data partner providers for that. But as far as acquisition, definitely with our platform and having the accessibility to order new data, the coverage, download the data for your own analytics and things like that, that's definitely going to be a very affordable cost. So we are definitely excited to start rolling that out.
Great, thank you, Jacob. Let me steer a little bit, add some clarity to the question is not necessarily your customers, right? But the end users of either the point cloud or the derivative products, right? Because with more time series data, higher point cloud densities, that puts an added compute cost, development costs on folks who are actually using the data. I'd wonder, how can folks make sure that they're keeping their costs down, but also getting the full benefit of the advances you guys are making at bringing higher density, more accurate, and more frequent LiDAR, and specifically 3-depth coverage to the table? We'll give Josh the next crack, then we'll go Josh and Jake, and then John. So Jeff, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Which order do you want me next? Sorry.
Just go ahead and yes, because you've
Go
finished.
ahead. You
Yes,
got
you're
sure,
next.
no problem. It
Okay.
doesn't. I'm good either way. I actually think Jeff and John covered this a bit earlier too. Is that the expectations change, right? I mean, so there is the cost as those change. So maybe the cost of a square mile of LiDAR doesn't necessarily go down, right? Or it goes down fairly slowly, but you are able to get more information out of that point cloud. So maybe we increase the type of classification. So you add buildings and vegetation, the two fairly straightforward things out of a typical LiDAR collect, right? So maybe there's a slight increase in cost as you get some of those things out, and then over time that decreases. And then as point densities continue to go up, maybe you start getting much more, power lines and poles and wires, and then that cost starts to come down. So I think it's going to be that cyclical that we've seen, LiDAR happen now, where it's like, hey, QL2 was a cost of QL2 went way down, but people don't want QL2 as much anymore, right? I mean, at least not in the US where they have that coverage. I mean, certainly globally, that's a need for a lot of things, and that consistency is a need for a lot of things. But QL1 then took its place, and there was an increase in cost. Sensors got better. We were able to do it more efficiently. That cost started to come down. You're going to start to see that kind of cycle. On your other part of your question of like the cost incurred to host and store this data, that's always going to be a challenge. Luckily, cost of storage comes down, right, over time as well, which we've seen very, very much. Even cost of solid state storage and things that we want to use for this type of program but also the compression models for LiDAR and things like that have gotten better, right? So, an LAS file may take up a certain amount of space. An LAZ version of that is 80% less, right? So you're only incurring that 20% increase. And so, you can keep kind of working through those processes, improve that classification, improve the compression, and then, make that compression available to softwares. They're all going to kind of have to follow each other as the data gets bigger and bigger as we work through those processes. But I think overall, some of that cost may go up in the short term, and then you'll see that gradual decline as you continue to work with the data.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Jeff?
Yeah, I guess not to just echo, because I agree wholeheartedly with Josh, but not to echo that. I guess maybe throwing a curveball if we want to look at costs and how game changing type things. I think it's and this is a big challenge. It's scary for us as a company, right? But it's a business model, right? So if you want to look at, okay, we have all this LiDAR data we've collected, and if we reformat it or deliver it in different ways, final products and so forth, USGS is okay with that, right? So let's say then we start looking more like a catalog license data model, right? Of putting that out there, but not so much the LiDAR data, all these derivatives, right? Of, okay, here's a subscription to statewide land use, right? And here's an application, you go out to this portal, and you can run land use off these different vintages of data and so forth for X dollars a year or so forth. I mean, I think at some point, because these costs, I mean, big data costs big money, right? And that's where the money's at, right? Is always in Whether it's processing it, hosting it, disseminating it, it's that big data, and that data is getting bigger and bigger as we want an appetite for, because we want higher resolution, higher accuracy, and so forth. So at some point, if you want this curve to keep going down, there's going to have to be a change in mindset. So that means, a lot of governments can't buy a license mapping survey data, right? That's got to change. But also, what's scary for me as a company is like, okay, if I go to that kind of business model to offer that data that much more affordably, I've got to have multiple customers for that. Who are they? Wolpert's a 110-year-old architecture and engineering firm. We fee for service firm, right? For 110 years, right? We do contracts for a project. It's your data, right? So if we go to that model, I mean, it's a big game changer, right? But again, just as we're talking, thinking about, okay, how do we deliver lower costs or whatever, big paradigm shifts, I think, could come in the future with the market, both with the government side, client side of how they contract and what they're willing to do as far as data purchases, but also companies like us would have to evolve and adapt to those kind of business models where, okay, I'm not just flying LiDAR for USGS. I'm taking, say we collect 30, 50 points per square meter, USGS wants 8 or 20 or whatever, the rest of that point cloud and a different type of deliverable, selling it to client X and client Y, and and those type of things. I think those are things that I think the market will evolve there for, in the future. I don't know how fast, but I think those are measures when you look at pure cost that could drive down that cost as the way we look at it today.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. John, you have anything to add around how users can start to think about their costs and how they need to adapt to advances in technology that are improving quality and coverage?
Yeah, for sure. So we're big proponents of scalability, automation, getting the human out of the loop as much as possible, involving them where necessary, but trying to automate, the dull, dirty, and dangerous kind of tasks that exist in the world. And I think, with the advent of automation and then formats like the cloud optimized formats, it lets you think really efficiently about how you're managing and handling and moving and storing and using your data. One of the trends we're looking at trying to reduce is the put it in the cloud, do something, take it out of the cloud, do something, put it in the cloud, do something, take it out of the cloud, do something. Because that in and out game wastes a lot of time and bandwidth and doesn't let you fully leverage the power of all that scalability. The other thing I would mention too around, data costs and data storage is that, I came up in a time when we would deliver data, on DVDs, and you'd have a person sitting there at a desk all day long burning DVDs, right? One after another. They probably had 3-4 machines going, just chucking discs, putting a label on it, putting it in a case, putting it like, it was ridiculous, right? And so when you look at your data storage costs today and you go, it never used to cost me that much. Did it really? Like, think about all those person hours that went into burning those DVDs and moving the data, shipping a hard drive, and like, it's kind of crazy when you look back at the labor and time involved in how we used to do things versus how we can do it today. Not even to mention, as Jess said, big data costs big money, but I think it also creates big opportunities, right? So because we have all of this data now in one big, accessible, scalable place, we can do so much more with it. And that's leading to bigger market opportunities for the people who are using this data really to generate products and run businesses. So I think just think broadly as you consider all of these things.
Perfect. Yeah, that was excellent. And so I'd love to make some time for Q&A. Before doing that, I'd love to give each of you an opportunity to kind of close out and give some closing remarks, specifically around with the keeping in mind that top of mind for states is how are we going to fund our next round of 3DEP data collection, and how are we going to build excitement around that? So I'd love to give you guys an opportunity to close out on why you think, on what you're excited about, and how we can, as an industry and a community, build excitement around the 3DEP program to ensure that sustainable funding moving forward with technology and the advancements that are being made in mind. And let's go opposite from what we started. So I think, Jacob, if you want to go first, then we'll go John, Josh, and Jeff.
Yeah. so really the excitement is the innovation around our technologies. So as we continue to develop, new ways to collect and acquire LiDAR data throughout the nation, but also the technologies that come along with the data processing side of things. And then that just opens the doors to the use cases for end users. And that's really the exciting part, is what's the data being used for? And that can be so broad, right? And it's really narrowing that down into the use cases of what the states are using it for, and turning that around and saying, here's all the innovation data that we can use to collect and process and derive all of these LiDAR products, and here's what we're using it for. It's just really, really opens the doors to everything. Recency of data, scale of the data, accessibility of the data, and the speed that we process it. That's the exciting part.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so IO Aerospace, our whole thing is special missions, unique data collection, wide area coverage. Again, because we have that modified Learjet with a dual payload bays, we're capable of flying high, fast, and far. I think there's, excitement around being able to collect data in new ways, being able to improve what we're doing in terms of accuracy, density, and, to some extent, maybe decreasing the cost as well while increasing product quality. I've seen a lot of good comments in the chat about specificity and speaking to, Congress people and senators and those involved in making those decisions around funding. And I would point to, the economic benefits of something like GPS, where it was spun up, it was created, and I think the latest values are something like $1.4 trillion it's created in the market because of access to GPS. And so if we look broadly at what the value of 3DEP data can create in terms of all the companies and all the products and all the derivatives and all the analysis that come out of it, I think it's a wide-ranging and probably a massive economic impact. So, speak the language that the funders want to hear, tell them, in their terms what they're looking for. And that benefits all of us in the 3DEP and the geospatial community.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Josh?
Yeah, I might turn it around a little bit, right? So I'm a technology person. I love the technology that we work with. Jacob knows this very well from working with me for years as well. I'm very excited about that. But what we do is driven by the needs of the community, right? So the end users, the states, the folks that are on this call right now, it really is driven by that. We can put together solutions to meet, I think, a lot of different needs, right? And we show that in those, the NIA, the studies that have been done to look at the cost benefit analysis, right? And I think, Jordan, you said it's kind of the best guess that we have, right? Of saying, hey, you as a community need to know where it's going to flood. So 3DEP's a great place for that, right? We have good topography. We can understand that. With higher densities, we may get a better Thalweg. We may understand better the geometry and where we have culverts that we couldn't see before in the elevation data, things like that. But, at the end of the day, I think this technology and the work that we're doing yields itself to a lot of those, public safety, public use data, right? And the more that we understand what your actual needs are and how you want to use this data, the better we can accommodate that in the solutions and the technology we build. It's not just for fun. We want to build a useful technology and a useful process. We may love doing it, but we need to make sure we always stay grounded in what it's going to be used for at the end of the day.
I love that perspective, Josh. Yeah, great point. Customer drives the direction. Jeff, you want to close us out?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things I guess really excites me, and I, philosophical, you wonder if we'd be here today doing this panel as we are, talking about what we're talking about, if there hadn't been 3DEP. With LiDAR, yes, would have progressed. The market would have went along, but I don't think at a pace or scale that it has. So I'm super excited that, 3DEP 1.0, right, is 90% complete, right? And we're already looking at states looking at refreshes at higher densities. And we're looking at the derivative program of all derivative programs, the 3DHP, right? So we're taking this LiDAR data set of the nation and putting it to work to produce nationwide updated hydro at a level we've never seen before. So that's super exciting. And then, and, you know, back to your comment about the state perspective, how to get ready, how to sell this, you know, how to sell LiDAR again to their state legislature and so forth. I mean, I hopefully, again, each state has its story, right? And I can think of many of the states we worked with of how this LiDAR's paid for itself, right? That there was a driver to get it funded the first time, and it delivered on that. And in most cases, delivered way beyond that, right? So you put together, it should be easier this time to put together the ROI for, hey, you know, we did LiDAR 6 years ago or whatever, and here are the problems we solved with that. Here was the benefits. You know, here are the 7 agencies that have used that, state agencies use that data in some way, from DOTs to DNR and you name it. So I think, you know, that's where states need to, you know, look back, right? How was this data? How did we put it to work for us? What did it solve for us? What did it do? Paint that story. And then, yeah, there's contractors like us and Dewberry and stuff out there. We're happy to come along to help because we want to fly LiDAR and help you with that too, with the advocacy and so forth. So I think, you know, as we look forward, you know, we've set a precedent with this program, and I think it's going to continue on and continue to be successful and keep driving technology. Again, it was the major driver. If we had not had this amount of work or LiDAR to do, you know, we wouldn't own the, you know, 5 LiDAR sensors we already own, commercial sensors, which we're going to continue to buy. We wouldn't have, you know, added the staff and aircraft and things we've done without a big program like 3DEP. And I don't think the manufacturers wouldn't have progressed as quickly, because there wouldn't have been the need, right? If the firms like ours weren't, you know, lining up to, hey, we need 3 more sensors. That's what drives innovation and so forth. So it's a great program. I've said it many times. I look at it, it's like a win-win-win, right? Everybody wins with what we've been doing with this national LiDAR program and the technology and stuff. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Excited to get here to talk with these great gentlemen here today about innovation, about what we're all doing, and yeah, look forward to the future and what's next. So
Great. I love that look back, Jeff, and the driver of 3DEP and how exciting it's been to really push the industry forward. I think that's a really good perspective. We do have some questions from the chat. Brian Milliken asked quite a while ago, has commercial use of LiDAR on autonomous car programs helped at all with LiDAR sensor cost reduction? Jeff, I'm going to send that one to you. Do you guys think about autonomous cars and has that helped you with your sensor production?
you know, for us, I can't say that it has. You know, gosh, probably longer than I realize now, at least 10 years or more ago, I purposely went and met with most of the major auto manufacturers to say, hey, we're here, we're pioneers in aerial LiDAR, we can help you. And of course, as we know, all these guys have done it themselves, right? They've went and bought their own LiDAR technology or created it. They bought and integrated their own LiDAR technology. And, you know, not to make light of it, but it is, you know, it's not as, and it's scary because it's our lives, safety here on the roads at stake, but it's not as, it's very dissimilar, right? It's not as advanced technology as what we deploy ourselves to do topographic mapping, oddly enough. So, yeah, we were hoping to have a bigger part in that world than we've had. But again, they're very protective, right? They don't, Ford and Chevy can't know what each other is doing, and they have their own solution. And then Tesla's trying to do it all with imagery and so forth. And they're very proprietary, but at the end of the day, now looking 10 years forward from back in those initial meetings, I ran around the country trying to meet with these guys. They've kind of all done it, figured it out on their own. And we haven't had much intersection with it.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else want to take a crack at that, or did Jeff kind of pretty much cover it?
I think that covered it.
All right, great. We also have a question from SK Cambria, and for folks who are still online, feel free to drop your messages in the Q&A button down below, or you can raise your hand and ask it yourself. I've got a queue going on here, so I'll try to keep track of where they're coming from. But in the Q&A down below would be a great way to hold your place so I don't skip you. We do have one from SK Cambria. And Brian, if you're open to answering questions, I think this one might be a little more in your wheelhouse. Jeff, potentially in yours with your SPRS standards experience. But SK Cambria asks, what accommodations are considered for small area collections, such as drone collections, to become part of the 3DEP ecosystem? Brian, I don't know if you're available to answer that, or if any of you guys want to take a crack at that. If not, I'm happy to field that as well.
Yeah, Jordan, I will say that there are no current plans to integrate drone acquisitions into 3DEP, but I want to be clear about what we're saying there. I think drone platforms, that could evolve to be large drones that have capabilities of staying up for a long time and acquiring more like they would do with a traditional fixed wing manned aircraft or crewed aircraft. And so the answer is it's there's no imminent plans to do that, but I don't think the program has any intentions of ever saying we won't consider things. Part of the next gen plan is looking at new modalities, and so I think there's reason to think that that discussion could take place. Remember, the program really prefers acquisitions to be large. We target acquisitions of desirably over 1,000 square miles. Most of our projects tend to be that size, but I think there's always room to adapt, and I think that's the thing that's really appreciate some of Jeff's comments about the program being a win-win-win. I think we all work together. We work with industry, we work with the federal agencies, we work with the stakeholders and the partners, and we figure out what we need to make the program be successful in future years. And so, if Jeff wants to jump on that, that's cool. But that would be my answer to that one, Jordan.
Great, thank you, Brian. Anyone else want to take a crack at that? I think Brian's the authority there, though. So, great. All right, we have a few questions. Sean, you put a question into the chat. This seems a little bit more directed towards Brian. Sean out of Minnesota. Do you want to kind of frame this towards the panelists, or do you want to save this for the next state team meeting?
I got two things in there. Let me see. The most recent one there.
The one about the spec and the density in the spec.
Yeah, just I'll add to it. You guys can figure out where it fits in. We could hold off for the next state meeting, but just couldn't get past thinking about everything I was hearing for all the advancements in the technology and the capabilities represented by the panel members here, and hearing the profound support for 3DEP, and I really like how Jeff summarized things, but I have to go back deep into my thinking and memory of what launched this was the need to have baseline data for the creation of contours and to facilitate what's on the U.S. national map. And I think about costs and how much we've talked about costs today, that it actually costs more to go back to acquire the LiDAR data, get the LiDAR data like we do for the state of Minnesota, and then go back and have to figure out how to classify the point clouds so we can actually have more business needs come out of it. Whereas if we're seeing the evolution that these folks are talking about today, if I'm going to bring costs into it, I think we can bring a cost-saving measure in here by expanding on the classification so more business needs can be met out of the gate. So it is going back to Brian Hadley for sure, but I just thought maybe it would be something about the dialogue about evolution, because I heard one of the panelists say it's the consumers and the customers who are driving all of this technically. And I see there's a huge limitation in the classification of a minimum base specification. And I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Sean. So what I heard Sean say is there's a gap to be filled in the classification that would add value to the users of this data right out of the gate. Does anyone want to field that or respond to it?
I guess maybe what I'll say is, I think we always advocate for that, and Jeff can comment here as well. But as a data producer, you're absolutely right. There is a cost there. It is more cost effective to do it when you collect it and initially process the data than it is to go back. And when we look at working with communities on their input into USGS and things like that, we always advocate for, hey, tell them what you actually need, and if that is additional classification, it should be costed in there, and it has been. We've had that successfully integrated into these programs before, where some states and some communities say, hey, I want building classification is part of it. Some of the funding still helps, comes from the USGS, but maybe they don't cover that part of it. But it can be included there, and you can see that cost savings at the time. So I think just keep bringing it up and pushing it, and the community will. I mean, we as producers are absolutely on board and can show what that cost savings is.
Great, thank you, Josh. Anyone else want to add anything there? All right, great. We have another question from William Powell. So Jeff, I missed it earlier when you first announced it. Do I assume correctly that this new topo system will not be available commercially? Also, is this development an extension of the original Buckeye program, or is this a new direction entirely?
So yeah, not available commercially is not our plans. I mean, we're building these internally for our use. Not to say that won't change in the future with, some of our partners, competitive mates or whatever, if they're interested in it, that we wouldn't consider it. But initial, yeah, it's self-funded by Wolpert R&D money, by our dollars for our use and so forth. Yeah, there's probably some few strains of DNA from the Buckeye program, right? That's something when I talked about us 15 years ago developing sensors, for the Buckeye program for the Army Geospatial Center. But I think more recently, the last 8 years, we've developed a topobathy sensor for the Corps of Engineers, a prototype, and that some of the core technologies there is what's moved forward. But of course, those technologies were lessons learned and things that came out of Buckeye. So I guess indirectly, sure, there are some strains of stuff dating back always 15 years ago to that first sensor we built for the Buckeye program.
Great, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the question, William. We've got another question from an anonymous participant. Very mysterious. Just kidding. It's cool to be anonymous. They're asking if we get to a point where LiDAR is being flown consistently via satellite, and I'm going to add my own method in there or other method, would this make it easier to map subsistence areas on a large scale? I'm thinking of being able to detect large sinkholes before they become an issue. Just a thought. And so, Jacob, I'll give you the first crack at this because they did specifically mention satellite, but I definitely want to give everyone a chance to respond here because this is a specific use case that I think is great to be brought up. Thank you for whoever submitted this.
Yeah, so kind of like what I said earlier is, that's what I'm excited for, is the opening the doors to various use cases and such as this. So yeah, really you'll be able to utilize our data and order data as, say every Thursday or daily, weekly, as we have a constellation of satellites roaming the earth for quality level 2 or better baseline data. The use cases are just endless. So taking that data, having a platform that we're constructing at a cloud-based service is, for you to pull the data down, be able to process it, analyze it, and really broaden your use cases, not only from that, but not just targeting specific areas, but is it a county scale? Is it a state scale? Is it across state borders? You'll be able to go in and draw your AOIs and really focus your target for use cases with our data.
Great.
And
Jake,
not only that, with our platform, we've integrated all the 3-depth data as well. So you can go in and look at archived 3-depth data. You can overlap that with ours. And then we're building a partnership program to integrate a bunch of partner data as well. So having just the availability and accessibility of it all is really, really exciting to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some data come out of NewView. As I understand, you're a few years out from first launch, but that's okay. We'll keep you guys on the radar screen. I'd like to add a couple of cents in here before giving everyone else a crack at it. I think it's important to mention that the 3-depth call for 5-year refresh will definitely add to this. And I think that's one of the most exciting things to me about having regularly refreshed data is, we've talked about change detection on this panel, but one of the biggest value adds is trend detection, right? It's not just what changed from A to B time, but based on that change with multiple data sets, can we start to track changes and anticipate things like sinkholes before they become an issue? I think that's a really awesome direction of the program, and something we should be really excited about with next generation 3DEP. But anyone else want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, I would just jump in there. I agree. I think high revisit rates, high recency to our geospatial data lets us, do that kind of rear looking change detection work. And then in terms of things like subsidence or sinkholes or sloughing or whatever you want to call it, I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of models we can create once we have terrain data at a higher frequency level. So I agree. I think it'll be fascinating to see what comes out of that. I mean, certainly as we've seen imagery products decrease their temporal latency and the time between images, we've seen all kinds of products come out of that and all kinds of insights, right? So I would expect the same thing would happen here with terrain level information.
Josh, Jeff, you have anything to add here?
I'll maybe shout out that, there are also other technologies. Certainly repeat LiDAR collect is important and will provide that. And we've seen that, right? Pre and post hurricane and pre and post disaster kind of things that we typically collect. But there's other technology, differential INSAR, things like that USGS also supports and has, programs to show deformation and show change like that. That could be leveraged in addition to LiDAR and other technologies to really hone in on that specific use case.
Absolutely. Great. Jeff, anything to add?
No, not really. I was thinking the same thing as Josh is, it's always about tools in the toolbox and using that right tool. And there are a lot of other data sets available as well to mix into that to solve those issues, and a plug for NOAA, right? I mean, NOAA's looking at large regional subsidence issues, right? California, Louisiana, and so forth. So yeah, I think the more as we build this catalog of data, right? Yeah, that being able to do that analysis between years and vintages of data, whether it's weeks or days or years, yeah, will be extremely powerful in the future. Some of the challenges we're facing.
Great. All right, thank you, everyone. Great question. We do have one more question here. It's in the chat from Jennifer out of Minnesota. She asks, as often as quality and spec compliant LiDAR is desired, and how often we will be able to get it from these various platforms, it seems the challenge will be keeping up with the frequency of checkpoints in the field. Thoughts on this? Anyone have thoughts on keeping up with frequency of checkpoints in the field?
I mean, it's a great concern, right? I mean, anytime you put people in the field, there's that additional cost. I think ASPRS has gone a long way, with their most recent updated specs to reduce the number that are sort of required under that sort of guidance for getting checkpoints. So that's one thing that will help. You don't need 1,200, maybe you need 100, right? Instead, which drastically reduces that cost. And then in certain areas, there is a reusability factor, right? I mean, you can go out and simply recheck a value. You can go back out and see if you have those problems. We do this in a lot of places all over the country where if it was collected once, we go and we look at if change hasn't really occurred in certain areas, potentially we can reuse that. It gets difficult when you have tectonic movement and you have places like California where you may have an earthquake. You have to be careful about how you do that. But if you ask those questions, it is very possible to say, over time, certain points can be reused and updated, with the latest, geoid epoch and things like that to get the right heights and the right positioning based on where it was before. So as long as you have that source data, you can reprocess it to the latest, models and potentially reuse some of those things. But it's absolutely true that it is a risk that you have to take into account.
Great, thank you, Josh. Anyone else have anything to add there? All right, great. We are at time. This is awesome. I really appreciate our panelists for joining us today and lending their expertise and vision of the future. I also really appreciate everyone who was able to hop on, contribute questions, and just listen to this really informative panel. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Keep your eyes out on the My NSGIC 3DEP for the Nation interest group community. It's a mouthful. For updates on when our August interest group meeting will be. And until then, I really appreciate you guys jumping out here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.